I attempted to run, but my legs felt utterly powerless against the overwhelming force that seemed to threaten my very existence. The dense woods surrounding me closed in, creating an oppressive sense of claustrophobia that made it difficult to breathe. Struggling to steady myself, I glanced upward and noticed the moon gazing down at me, its faint smile accompanied by a scattering of stars that, for a brief moment, seemed to ease my mounting fear. The tranquility was shattered when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me, each one accompanied by the sharp crack of broken branches underfoot. My body instinctively turned toward the source of the noise, my face pale as ash, frozen in place yet acutely aware of the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I waited for another branch to snap under the heavy tread of whatever was approaching. But there was only silence. The quiet, however, did not last long. Silence, it seemed, was not a characteristic of these woods. An owl's hoot pierced the air, followed by yet another branch breaking. Summoning all my strength, I forced my legs to move backward, one cautious step at a time. Another sound echoed from the same direction, though this time it was slightly different, softer yet no less menacing. I took another step back and felt something solid collide with my back. It was a massive tree, its thick branches sprawling outward like skeletal arms. I wondered if the creature, whatever it was, had heard me as clearly as I had heard it. Climbing the tree was out of the question. I had never learned how. Instead, I slowly edged around its trunk and concealed myself behind it. Curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked out to catch a glimpse of whatever might be pursuing me. There was nothing there, or so it seemed. Perhaps it was toying with me, or perhaps my mind was playing tricks on me. At this point, I couldn't tell what was real anymore. My eyes widened in shock as a figure emerged from the shadows of the dense forest. It was an elderly man, clutching a long gun in his hands. His clothes were ragged, and his old fishing hat sat crookedly on his head, adding to his disheveled appearance. The moonlight illuminated his face, revealing glassy, unmoving eyes. Was he blind? My mind screamed at me to remain perfectly still, to not make a single sound. The only part of me that moved was my eyes, which tracked the old man's every movement. He too seemed frozen, his stance betraying his confusion. Suddenly, he raised his gun and fired. The deafening blast tore through the silence, and a hole appeared in a tree to my right. Despite the shock of the noise, I remained motionless, knowing that any sound I made could spell disaster. The old man walked past me, and after a few steps he fired another shot. I didn't dare look behind me to see where the bullet had landed. My gaze remained fixed ahead, too terrified to turn around. There were no more shots. The old man seemed to have vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. Maybe it was safe to make a run for it, to escape to the other side of the woods. But I couldn't. I felt as though I had become one with the tree, rooted to the spot. When the sun rises, I told myself, this will all be over. When the sun rises, I will flee this place. When the sun rises, this nightmare will come to an end. When the sun rises, I will no longer be trapped by this tree and these suffocating woods. When the sun rises, the night dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. My mind raced with thoughts of what might happen if the old man returned, or if something even more sinister lurked in the shadows. The forest seemed alive, its whispers growing louder as the hours passed. I clung to the hope that daylight would bring salvation, that the first rays of the sun would banish the darkness and the terror that had taken hold of me. But until then, I remained hidden, my back pressed against the rough bark of the tree, my breath shallow and my heart pounding. The woods were no longer just a place, they were a prison, and I was at the mercy of whatever forces dwelled within them. The old man's glassy eyes haunted my thoughts, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, waiting, watching. As the night wore on, I repeated my mantra to myself, a desperate plea for the dawn to come quickly. When the sun rises, I will be free. When the sun rises, this will all be a distant memory. When the sun rises, I will escape this living nightmare. When the sun rises, but for now, I waited, my body tense and my mind racing, hoping that the light of day would bring an end to the terror that had consumed me. The forest remained silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl, and so I stayed there, trapped between fear and hope, until the first faint glow of dawn began to creep over the horizon.